62 years old, Julian Lennon broke decades of silence with a single admission that shook fans around the world. Just 6 words, sharp, bitter, and raw. I utterly hated her. For a man who had spent most of his life keeping family wounds private, this confession tore the curtain back on a truth the world had long suspected but never fully heard. Behind those words lies a story drenched in pain, betrayal, and survival. It's a tale of broken homes and fractured legacies, of a boy forced to grow up in the shadow of a father adored by millions, yet absent where it mattered most. For Julian, the Lennon name wasn't a blessing. It was a burden that left scars he carried well into adulthood. Long before he became the reluctant heir to rock royalty, Julian was just a boy who wanted something ordinary, a steady home, a present father, and the comfort of being seen. To the outside world, his life looked enviable. He was John Lennon's firstborn, destined for a charmed life. Fans pictured mansions, limousines, and endless privilege. Truth was far from it. Inside the Lennon household, happiness was fragile if it existed at all. When John walked out, he didn't just leave a wife and child behind. He abandoned a family, moving on to a new life, a new love, and eventually a new son. For Julian, there was no explanation, no closure. Just silence, confusion, and the aching absence of a father figure. His mother, Cynthia, was left to pick up the pieces. She worked tirelessly to hold their small world together, sometimes selling precious belongings just to keep food on the table. To outsiders, they were the family of a Beatle. In reality, they lived in modest flats, relied on second-hand clothes, and fought to keep the lights on. At school, Julian's famous last name made him a target. Other children mocked him, taunted him, even bullied him physically. Teachers looked the other way, assuming that being John Lennon's son meant he was too privileged to need help. What they didn't see was the quiet boy who carried an empty ache, the child who longed not for fame or fortune, but simply for love. As Julian grew older, that longing turned to bitterness. He watched the world worship his father as a prophet of peace and love, a man who preached unity in every song. But at home, John's presence was a rare occurrence, his affection scarcer still. The image the world adored clashed violently with the reality Julian lived. And the hypocrisy cut deep. It stung most when John poured his energy into raising his younger son, Sean. Press called John a devoted father. Photographs showed him tender, playful, fully engaged. But for Julian, those images were like salt in an open wound, proof that the love he'd craved had been given to someone else. Rumors swirled for years that John had once referred to Julian as a mistake. Whether exaggerated or not, the damage was done. Julian grew up with a lingering sense that he was unwanted, an afterthought in his father's story. Cynthia did everything she could to fill the gap, but nothing could erase the sting of rejection. By his teens, Julian had stopped expecting anything real from his father. Their phone calls were rare, their meetings awkward and hollow. Occasionally, John would send a guitar or offer a kind word, but it was never enough to bridge the chasm between them. Hope flickered, but it never lasted. Then came December 1980. The world was rocked by the news that John Lennon had been shot dead in New York City. Fans poured into the streets, weeping, holding vigils, singing his songs. But Julian's grief was different. It was quieter, heavier. Days before his father's murder, he had spoken to John and felt, for the first time in years, a sense of possibility. Maybe reconciliation was finally within reach. That fragile hope was ripped away in a single violent moment. Yoko Ono announced there would be no public funeral. No chance for Julian to say goodbye. The world mourned a legend. Julian mourned the father he never truly had. The betrayal didn't end there. When John's will was read, Julian was devastated to learn that nearly everything had been left to Yoko and Sean. For Julian, it wasn't about money. It was about recognition, a simple acknowledgement that he mattered to his father. Instead, the will confirmed his deepest fear. He had been erased from John's story. For years, Yoko Ono controlled John's estate, the music, the legacy. Julian fought long and hard for his place, launching legal battles that dragged on for years. Newspapers painted him as greedy. But those who looked deeper saw something different, a son fighting not for wealth but for identity, for the right to exist in his father's history. This battle cemented Julian's resentment toward Yoko. To him, she wasn't a stepmother. She was a gatekeeper, a constant reminder of what had been taken. Public encounters between them were strained, their smiles forced, their interactions icy. For nearly 2 decades, Julian saw her as an enemy, someone who stood between him and everything he had lost. But time has a way of softening even the hardest edges. Slowly, the anger gave way to something else. A fragile truce was born, not out of love, but out of necessity. For Sean's sake, Julian learned to coexist with Yoko. They were never close, and they never would be. But the constant war finally ended. Through all of this, Julian's relationship with Sean became his anchor. First, jealousy and distance kept them apart. Sean was the golden child, the one who received the love Julian had been denied. But as adults, the two found each other in unexpected ways. Shared pain, shared blood, and a mutual need for connection forged a bond that grew stronger over time. Together, they sifted through memories, shared music, and even laughed at the ironies of their upbringing. Sean's kindness reminded Julian that holding on to hate only deepened the wound. For the first time, Julian felt like he truly belonged, not just to a name but to a family. Even as he carved his own path, the weight of the Lennon name never left him. Music, his first love, proved both a gift and a curse. Every song he released was measured against his father's genius. Critics expected another John Lennon, but Julian could never live up to that impossible standard. Eventually, he turned to other passions: photography, writing, and philanthropy. These pursuits gave him something music never could: freedom from comparison. He stopped chasing approval and began living for himself. Documentaries and Beatles nostalgia would always circle back, reminding him of where he came from. But Julian no longer let that define him. Instead, he chose to honor his father's memory in his own way, through art, through resilience, and through the decision to keep moving forward. His confession, "I utterly hated her," was not just about Yoko Ono. It was about everything she symbolized: the years of pain, the lost opportunities, the fractured family. Yet in the end, Julian chose not to remain trapped in hatred. He built a fragile peace, not for her, but for himself and his brother. Julian Lennon's story isn't one of fairy tale forgiveness or dramatic reconciliation. It's a story of survival, of carrying scars and learning to live with them. It's about the hidden cost of fame, the myth of perfect families, and the strength it takes to step out of the shadow of a giant. And maybe, just maybe, it's about the quiet power of letting go,